The atmosphere in the government command center was electric with a mix of tension and anticipation. The planet Verdana, a human colony on the frontier of explored space, had never seen an alien vessel approach their orbit before. The room buzzed as military and political leaders gathered around the central holoscreen displaying the sleek and imposing alien craft that hung silently above their world. Commander Jack Mason, a seasoned military officer with years of frontier experience, was the first to break the silence. "Has there been any communication?" he asked, his voice cutting sharply through the murmurs. Lieutenant Gareth Reynolds, responsible for communications, adjusted his headset before responding. "Yes, sir. They've sent a greeting in several linguistic patterns. We've managed to parse it. It's a message of peace and dialogue. Across the room, Dr. Alan Harris, a top xenobiologist, whispered to his aide, "Remarkable. First real proof we are not alone in the universe, and they come bearing olive branches." Jack turned to face the assembly. "Peace or not, we need to keep our guard up. Reynolds, set up a meeting. I want to meet this alien face to face. Use the universal gestures of diplomacy." Already on it, Commander Gareth nodded, tapping commands into his console. The preparations were swift. Within hours, a delegation was arranged to meet Kale, the alien emissary, in a secure facility. Jack was chosen to lead, given his diplomatic experience and military background. As the alien ship opened, a ramp descended, and a figure emerged. Kale was tall, his skin a shimmering silver, with eyes that reflected deep cosmic wisdom. He wore a simple tunic that seemed to ripple with colors that had no name in the human spectrum. "Welcome to Verdana, Kale. I'm Commander Jack Mason." Jack extended his hand, a gesture of earthly goodwill. Kale mimicked the gesture, his hand cool and smooth. "Thank you, Commander. I am here to foster understanding between our peoples." The conversation moved to a high-security meeting room where Jack, Kale, and their respective teams sat across from each other. Jack's team consisted of Dr. Harris, Gareth, and several military advisors. Kale was alone, his demeanor calm and collected. "Why come to us?" Dr. Harris asked, leaning forward. "You must have observed us. What made you decide we were ready for this?" "Our observations concluded that humanity stands at a crucial juncture," Kale explained, his voice a melody of chimes. "Your technology, your culture, and your spirit show potential for great achievements or significant perils." Jack eyed the alien, his instincts tingling with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "What exactly are you offering?" "Knowledge, Commander. Shared learning to avert the perils and achieve the marvels. However, trust must be the foundation of this new relationship." Kale's eyes fixed on Jack with an intensity that felt almost palpable. Jack nodded slowly, turning to look at his team. "And if we refuse?" "Then I leave, and your civilization will continue as it has, with whatever end that entails." Kale's tone remained neutral, giving nothing away. The room fell silent, the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone present. Jack finally spoke. "We'll consider your offer, but know this, Kale Verdana is under my protection. Any false moves, and we will respond accordingly." Kale nodded, a gesture that seemed laden with respect. "Understood, Commander. I admire your commitment to your people." As the alien departed, Jack turned to his team. "Keep an eye on him, Reynolds. Set up surveillance. Harris, I want a full analysis of everything he says. We're not diving into this blind." "Understood, sir." They responded in unison. Jack watched the alien return to his ship, a myriad of thoughts racing through his mind. This first contact could change everything, and he had to ensure humanity came out of it on top. In the dim light of her small, cluttered office, Alara meticulously laid out her tools. The walls were lined with screens displaying various angles of Kale's daily routines, which she had been monitoring closely since his arrival. Alara, known for her precision and unwavering focus, was a top assassin for the government's covert operations. This job, however, was unlike any she had undertaken before. On her desk lay a blueprint of the diplomatic quarters where Kale was housed. Her fingers traced the routes he commonly took, her mind racing through scenarios. Each potential plan was methodically evaluated for risks and outcomes. Beside the blueprints, a digital pad filled with notes and observations buzzed with incoming data. Her colleague, Damon, a strategist and her second-in-command, entered the room, his presence marked by a soft chime as the door slid open. "Got a minute?" he asked, holding up a tablet with fresh intel. "Make it quick," Alara responded without looking up from her work. Damon walked over and placed the tablet in front of her. Security's been beefed up around Kale's quarters since yesterday. Seems like your little stunt with the surveillance drone didn't go unnoticed. Alara sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. We need a new angle. Close quarters approach is too risky now. Any ideas? Actually, yes, Damon said, pulling up a file on the tablet. Kale is scheduled to attend a cultural exchange event at the Civic Center 3 days from now. It's public, with minimal security to keep the atmosphere welcoming. That's our window. Alara nodded slowly, her brain shifting gears as she considered the implications. We need a distraction, something big but not lethal. I can blend in with the event staff, get close. Damon grinned. I thought you might say that. I've arranged for a small smoke device to be smuggled in. It's harmless but should cause enough chaos for you to do your thing. Perfect, Alara murmured, her eyes already scanning the layout of the Civic Center on another screen. And escape routes? Backstage leads to the service corridors. From there, you can exit through the maintenance hatch that opens near the river. It's secluded and away from the main exit points, Damon explained, highlighting the route on the map. Alara stood, stretching her muscles, feeling the familiar thrill of a challenge. All right, get the device ready. I'll prep the rest. We need this to go smoothly. No mistakes, Damon nodded. Understood. I'll back you up from the control room. We'll have eyes on you the entire time. As Damon left, Alara turned back to her screens, her gaze settling on a live feed of Kale. He was talking animatedly with a group of human diplomats, his gestures calm and measured. She watched him, a pang of something unfamiliar fluttering in her chest. Was it doubt or perhaps admiration? Shaking her head, she dismissed the thought. Emotions were a liability she couldn't afford. Focused, she whispered to herself, taking a deep breath. The plan was set, and she had a job to do. Despite the complexities of her feelings, the mission was clear. Kale was a target, and she was the blade. The stakes were higher than ever, but Alara was ready. After all, failure was not a word in her vocabulary. The Civic Center was bustling, filled with an array of humans and a few members of Kale's entourage from Vrex, mingling under the guise of cultural exchange. Vibrant banners hung from the ceiling, and stalls showcasing human and Vrexian artifacts lined the walls, creating an atmosphere of shared curiosity and tentative friendship. Despite the apparent goodwill, an undercurrent of tension threaded through the crowd, a remnant of the escalating anti-alien sentiments among certain human factions. Commander Jack Mason patrolled the perimeter, his eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of trouble. His communicator buzzed discreetly. It was Alara checking in before she executed her plan. Commander, everything's in place. Initiating in 5, Alara's voice was calm, almost too calm. Proceed with caution, Alara. Remember, the goal is to control the situation, not escalate it, Jack responded, his tone stern. Nearby, Kale was deeply engaged in a conversation with Dr. Alan Harris, discussing the technological advancements of Vrex that could benefit human agriculture. Kale's enthusiasm was palpable, his hands moving gracefully as he described techniques that were light years ahead of human capabilities. As Alara, disguised as one of the event staff, moved closer to her target, her internal conflict grew. Observing Kale's genuine interest in aiding humanity conflicted with her mission's deadly purpose. She tucked a small device into her sleeve, a tool that would soon create a smoke screen, allowing her to isolate Kale momentarily. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the hall as a group of protesters broke through the security barriers, waving anti-alien placards and shouting slurs. The crowd recoiled, and chaos ensued as security rushed to contain the situation. Now's my chance, Alara thought. But her resolve wavered when a child near the front of the stage began to cry, frightened by the commotion. Kale's reaction was immediate. He moved towards the child, his demeanor calm and soothing. His concern in the midst of danger softened Alara's resolve for a moment. However, duty overcame hesitation. She activated the smoke device, and a thick gray fog enveloped the area. Screams and confusion multiplied as people scrambled. Alara advanced toward Kale, her knife concealed and ready. But as she reached him, Kale, seemingly aware of her presence, turned to face her directly, his eyes not condemning but understanding. Why? He asked simply, his voice low enough for only Alara to hear over the chaos. Alara froze, the knife's edge a whisper away from Kale. Her hand trembled, not with fear but with uncertainty. This wasn't the face of an enemy, this was someone who had just comforted a scared child. Could she carry out her mission based on orders alone? Before she could decide, Jack intervened, having noticed her approach on the surveillance feeds. "Alara, stand down," he shouted, making his way through the crowd, his own doubts about the mission surfacing as he observed Kale's actions. The smoke began to clear, and Alara slowly lowered her weapon, stepping back as Jack reached them. The protesters were being corralled, and the panic subsided, but the impact of the moment lingered. Jack eyed Alara with a mix of disappointment and relief. "We need to reassess our strategy," he said quietly to her, then turned to Kale with an apologetic expression. "Kale, I apologize for this disruption. It seems we have much to discuss." Kale nodded, his gaze shifting between Alara and Jack, a silent acknowledgement of the complexity of their situation. As the crowd began to calm, Alara stepped back into the shadows, her mind racing with doubt. This mission had shaken her, not because of its danger, but because of the moral questions it raised. How could she continue when her target might be the very catalyst needed to advance humanity, not its doom? The clash of civilizations was no longer just between humans and aliens, but within her own beliefs. In the wake of the chaotic event at the Civic Center, Alara found herself increasingly isolated as she grappled with the moral implications of her assignment. The foiled attempt and Kale's gentle inquiry haunted her thoughts. Despite this, she was a professional, and failure was not an option she was willing to entertain without one last effort. 2 days later, at a serene botanical garden, where Kale was scheduled to speak about environmental conservation, a subject he was passionately vocal about, Alara prepared for her second attempt. This time, the plan was direct and deadly: a sniper attack from a concealed location overlooking the garden. Damon, still her loyal ally despite his own growing reservations, coordinated the logistics. He set up communication links and ensured Alara had a clear line of sight. "You're sure about this?" he asked through the comm link, his voice tinged with concern. "It has to be done. We can't afford distractions. Kale's vision might be grand, but it's not aligned with our directives," Alara responded, her voice steely, trying to convince herself as much as Damon. As Kale began his discourse, surrounded by lush greenery and an audience captivated by his vision of a symbiotic relationship between humans and nature, Alara positioned herself. Her finger caressed the trigger, her scope fixed on Kale, who stood illuminated by the soft afternoon light. But as she watched him through the sniper scope, Alara saw not a target, but a being full of conviction and hope. Kale spoke of growth, renewal, and the potential for a united galactic community. His words resonated with the crowd, and even through the lens, Alara felt their impact. "Alara, what's your status?" Damon's voice crackled in her ear, pulling her back from her hesitation. I'm on it," she murmured, her resolve faltering. Just as she prepared to refocus, a sudden movement at the edge of her vision caught her attention. A young boy had wandered slightly away from the crowd, chasing a fluttering butterfly. The innocence of the moment, coupled with Kale's ongoing speech about protecting future generations, struck a chord in her. With a deep, involuntary sigh, Alara lowered her rifle. "Damon, abort." "I can't. We can't do this." "Not like this," she whispered, a mix of frustration and relief washing over her. There was a pause on the line before Damon replied, his voice heavy. "Copy that. Returning to base." Alara packed up her gear, her thoughts a whirlwind of conflict and confusion. As she retreated, she glanced back at the crowd, seeing the faces lit with inspiration from Kale's words, and felt an unfamiliar pang of hope herself. Later that evening, Jack summoned her to a secure location, a dimly lit, sparsely furnished room that served as a crisis meeting point. Jack's expression was grim but not surprised as he greeted her. "Alara, I watched everything. You had him in your sights," he stated plainly, crossing his arms. "I know." "I couldn't do it, Jack. Not after seeing all of this. His intentions, his actions, they're not our enemy. Maybe it's time we reconsider what we're fighting for," Alara confessed, the weight of her words hanging heavily between them. Jack studied her for a moment, his features softening. "I've been having my own doubts, Alara. Maybe it's time we bring this to the higher-ups. If Kale really can offer what he promises, perhaps we need to listen." Relief and resolve filled Alara. She was not alone in her doubts, and perhaps, just maybe, there was a way forward that didn't involve violence. "Thank you, Jack. Let's figure this out together." As they left the meeting room, the weight of their decisions loomed large, but so did the possibility of change. Their path forward was uncertain, fraught with political and personal risk, but for the first time, Alara felt that the right decision might also be the most difficult one. In the aftermath of the failed assassination attempt, Alara and Jack found themselves at a crossroads. The clear view of Cale's character and intentions had shifted their perspective drastically. Rather than seeing him as a target, they began to see him as a potential ally. Yet working with Cale meant contravening direct orders, a move that could be seen as treasonous. Alara spent the evening in her apartment, poring over all the information she had on Cale and his planet Vrex. Her room was cluttered with surveillance photos, intercepted communications, and her own extensive notes. As she reviewed the data, she couldn't help but feel a growing respect for Cale's commitment to peace and advancement for all beings. The next morning, Alara met Jack at a discreet cafe to discuss their next steps. They sat at a corner table, away from any prying ears. "We need to figure out if Cale is truly as benevolent as he seems. If he is, we might have to protect him," Jack said, his voice low and serious. Alara nodded, her mind racing with the potential consequences. "If we go against our orders, we're putting everything on the line. Our careers, our lives, maybe even the safety of this colony," she replied, her tone equally grave. As they strategized, a message from Damon popped up on Alara's device. It was urgent, need to meet now. Have info. She showed Jack, and they quickly left for their secure facility. Damon was waiting for them, his expression tense. "I've intercepted communications from a faction within our government. They're not just planning to take Cale out, they want to use his death as a spark to ignite a war with Vrex," he revealed, handing over the encrypted files. The documents laid out a chilling plan. Assassinate Cale and frame Vrex for a retaliatory attack on human outposts. It was a ploy to rally public support for a war that would expand human territory, but at enormous cost. "We can't let this happen," Jack said, his decision firm. "Cale's offer of shared knowledge and technology is genuine. He could help us avoid a lot of suffering and loss. Then we protect him. We expose this plot and show everyone the truth," Alara stated, her resolve hardening. "Damon, keep digging. We need more evidence." "Jack, we should warn Cale." Agreeing, Jack arranged a private meeting with Cale, taking every precaution to ensure their conversation wouldn't be monitored. They met in a secluded section of the botanical gardens, the same place Alara had once aimed to end his life. "Cale, your life is in danger," Jack began without preamble, his face solemn. "There are elements within our government who wish to see you dead. They plan to use your assassination as a pretext for war." Cale's reaction was calm, his gaze steady. "I suspected my journey here might stir such shadows. I'm grateful for your honesty and protection." Alara stepped forward, the weight of her previous actions heavy on her shoulders. "I was one of those sent to kill you.